Everything you saw in that episode, it was fake. Those weren't the comments of a critic on the internet. They were from within the Brown family itself. Consider this for a moment. The tender scene of Kody combing his son's hair, the adorable cut of Robyn rousing Ariella to go to school, it was all fabricated. It wasn't family life. It was TV life, precisely produced for TLC cameras. And here's the really unexpected part. Beyond the waffles and the smiles, Kody and Robyn were keeping secrets much darker. Conspiracies, control. Beliefs so bizarre that they drove their family further apart with each new season. And if you thought it was outrageous that even the children acknowledged the show was scripted, just wait until you get an earful of what went down when Christine revealed Kody's world of deceptions. The first day of school is meant to be special. Moms taking pictures at the door, children anxious but hopeful, a feeling of family closeness. That's the picture TLC wished we'd see from the Browns' Kody and Robyn. A father cooking waffles. A mother waking up her daughter with tender words. A home filled with care and love. Yet, if you take a closer look, the image doesn't hold. Indeed, it cracks just about as quickly as you can say, crack, because the reality, as shown by the family members themselves, is that Kody doesn't cook waffles. He doesn't brush his children's hair. He doesn't wake them up with soft words. Those were not morning routines by any means. They were staged. A camera crew had to be fed content, and the Browns had to cooperate. So a father not given to morning routines suddenly found himself starring in one. A sleep-drowsy child wasn't fighting school. She was fighting the camera jammed into her face. Consider what that implies. Kody, it's a gentleman. A child's first day of school, distilled not into a milestone but into a scene. A family moment, reimagined as family television. Kody stumbling with a toaster oven wasn't clumsiness alone. It was unnatural. The stilted acting of a man appearing to be something he was not. He even referred to school supplies as school equipment, an error that only served to emphasize how distant this was from his life. And here's where things get cringy. To the audience, it was cute. To the network, it filled an episode. But to the kids, to the wives, it was one more reminder that the world they were existing in wasn't even theirs. Each smile, each laugh, each strategically produced normal moment was another step closer to falseness. Another level of pretending. Because behind that shiny kitchen counter, behind the camera shots and happy narration, something sinister was germinating. A secret nobody could keep forever. Suppose, for a moment, what it is like to be a kid in the house. The alarm blares. You open your eyes, and before you even stretch, there's a boom mic above, and a camera right in front of your face. You're not waking up to your mother's voice. You're waking up to an audience. That's the moment viewers saw with little Ariella, looking uncomfortable, shrinking back under her blankets. People thought she was being stubborn, but those close to the family later explained the truth. She wasn't fighting the morning. She was fighting the invasion of it. Because when real life turns into show life, privacy is lost. Tiny precious moments that are meant to be only for a family are recorded, polished, and shown to millions. It wasn't Ariella who craved attention that day. It was the producers. And so Robyn, doing her job, leaned into the role of loving mother, softly stirring her daughter from sleep. In front of the camera, it was adorable. Behind the camera, it was content. And the child was aware of it. And this is the sad part. Children are not actors. They do not sign contracts. They do not consent to be relatable plotlines for viewers at home. But for Ariella and Solomon, each breakfast, each car ride, each messy school morning could become a segment if the cameras required it. That's the burden they grew up with. And you can almost see it in their faces. It was marketed as innocence, but if you replay it in your head, the innocence isn't there. What replaces it is discomfort, awkwardness, and this feeling that this isn't a family living life. It's a family giving up life for TV. And when the cameras ceased filming that morning, what remained was not the recollection of a joyful first day of school. It was the reminder that even the smallest, most personal parts of their lives belonged to everyone but them. And if you thought that was the most disturbing revelation from behind the scenes, Just wait until you see how Kody and Robyn's secret beliefs began to influence, and finally shattered, the rest of the family. What makes this most disturbing is how painstakingly the illusion was constructed. The show needed the audience to think they were experiencing an average family morning. The whirlwind of breakfast, the rush of backpacks, the laughter and groans of children dashing out the door. But those who worked behind the scenes made certain that wasn't life. It was set design. Each moment was crafted for the camera, not the family. Think of Kody, fumbling with a toaster oven, squinting through his glasses as if he'd never seen one before. On screen, it was played for laughs. The clueless dad, the relatable morning struggle. But in reality, it wasn't just unfamiliarity, it was performance. Kody was pretending to be a man he wasn't. A father deeply involved in his children's routines. A husband who carried his weight at home. That was the role TLC required him to perform. But in real life, that role didn't exist. Even his words were a lie. Referring to his son's school supplies as school equipment wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the blunder of one entering a role he didn't know. Because when you don't inhabit the reality you're pretending to, the cracks always appear. And those cracks were ubiquitous. The forced awkwardness of Kody brushing Solomon's hair. The over-the-top patience with Ariella's wake-up. The way all of these real moments were just a bit too forced. Audiences didn't necessarily realize it while it was happening, but when Mykelti and Tony broke the news later, that Kody never actually did these things in real life, everything came sharply into perspective. We weren't seeing reality. We were seeing a produced impression of reality. And that's when a more sinister question arises. If the mundane scenes, breakfast, school mornings, family banter were being staged, what other aspects of life had been staged? How much of the tear-jerking, the drama, the so-called family conflicts were real, and how much was just another narrative, concocted to keep everyone in their seats? And it was because as the seasons went on, the answer to that question became bleaker than anyone had envisioned. But the breakdown of Kody's on-camera persona didn't end with breakfast episodes. Behind the camera, a whole other reality was playing out. One that never fit the perfect family image TLC was trying to peddle. Christine's memoir showed what really went down. Kody had fallen deep into the abyss of internet conspiracy theories. Not innocuous opinions, not idle curiosity, but a rabbit hole of disinformation that started to tint almost every aspect of his existence. It began with health. Kody and Robyn came to think that common things held secret perils. A phone in your pocket? To them it wasn't technology. It was a quiet menace, waiting to ruin fertility or induce cancer. The science couldn't sustain it, but that made no difference. These concepts gained traction, and soon their children were growing up under regulations constructed not upon facts, but upon fear. And then COVID struck. When the pandemic occurred, families and film crews all over the industry adhered to strict guidelines to safeguard one another. But Kody and Robyn did not. Vaccines weren't safe. They were toxic. Masks and social distancing weren't protection. They believed. They were tyranny. And so while the rest of the family attempted to abide, Kody and Robyn drew away even more, believing that those abiding by protocol were somehow harmful. This wasn't merely a health disagreement. It was a wedge. A line drawn through the family, dividing trust and singling out connections. Christine called it draining, seeing Kody portray himself on television as a protective, cautious father. In private, repudiating all precaution TLC insisted on. On television he cared, off television he accused. And that's where the illusion of sister wives began to unravel. Because what viewers saw was a man claiming to keep his family safe. What the family lived was a man driven by conspiracies, suspicion, and a growing obsession with control. And if you believe the pandemic exposed the worst of it, wait until you see how these beliefs didn't stop at health. They became weapons. Kody used to maintain space, to exert control, and to rationalize the cracks splitting his family apart. As the world outside battled a pandemic, the Browns were battling their own internal war behind the walls of their own homes. COVID didn't only put their health to the test, it tested their loyalty. For Kody, it was the perfect storm. A platform to assert his authority, and an excuse to distance himself from the wives who questioned him. He established rules that appeared less about protection and more about controlling their lives. If Janelle's children worked or spent time with friends, Kody labeled them irresponsible. If Christine let her children have normal lives, he labeled her as putting everyone in danger. But in the same breath, he discounted his own advice, spending almost all his time with Robyn and her children. To the rest of them, it wasn't about keeping them safe. It was favoritism, plain and unmistakable. You might see the anger simmer, show by show. Kody's sons, Gabriel and Garrison, pleaded for their dad's approval, only to be instructed they weren't doing things the right way. Christine saw her daughter Isabel getting ready for a significant surgery, pleading for her father's help. But Kody said traveling during COVID was too dangerous. And then, practically in the same instant, he was cozily with Robyn, bending his own rules when it was convenient for him. It was a double standard so acute that it cut across decades of familial harmony. To outsiders, Kody espoused sacrifice. To insiders, he operated by exclusion. And gradually the family started seeing it as what it was. Not a father defending his household, but a man closing his hold on the last corner of it, he maintained. For Christine, that was the tipping point. The marriage had been weak to begin with. But during the pandemic, reality became undeniable. Kody was found to be Robyn's partner, not hers anymore. And with every decision he made, it only got more evident. And if you believe Christine's move to finally leave was all about a failed relationship, you'll be amazed to discover how her departure uncovered secrets that risked breaking down the very fabric of the family's narrative. Christine had lived for years in the shadow of a promise that plural marriage equated with equal love, equal partnership, equal respect. But by the pandemic, that promise had been broken. Every rule Kody imposed, every slight she received, every quiet night at home alone, in a house no longer homelike, it all weighed into a decision she had silently been carrying in her heart. The turning point came with Isabel's operation. Her daughter required her father. She required his strength, his presence, his love. But Kody did not show up, hiding his absence behind the guise of safety. To Christine, that was not protection. It was abandonment. And amidst the silence, something changed inside of her. The man she had stood up for, trusted and sacrificed for, was not returning. He had opted for another existence, another partner, another family to prioritize. When she finally informed Kody that she was leaving, it wasn't in anger, it was in clarity. The pandemic had already created tension between Janelle and Kody. Her boys, Gabriel and Garrison, were rejected by their father, pushed aside for Robyn's children. Janelle stood up for them, and in doing so found herself at odds with Kody's so-called rules. With each fight, she felt further isolated, not just from him but from the fantasy that their marriage was still intact. When Christine departed, it was akin to holding up a mirror. Janelle viewed her own tiredness, her own solitude, her own silent resignation that had become day-to-day life. And she started to see that loyalty wasn't love. That sacrifice without an equivalent return was merely a slow form of erasure. Kody, on the other hand, wrapped his arms around Robyn tighter, holding not only the favored wife, but also the sole wife who still had faith in him. To everyone else, it wasn't subtle. It was as plain as day, and the plainer it got, the more impossible it became to deny. Janelle, the one who had once borne the badge of being practical with honor, now felt the suffocating weight of being unloved, unappreciated, and unwanted. Fans typically refer to Christine's departure as the pivot of Sister Wives. But the truth is, Janelle's awakening was the silent earthquake. She screamed not, she lashed not, she merely opened her eyes. And once you open your eyes, you can't pretend anymore. The question wasn't whether Janelle would take the route Christine had taken. The question was when. And that running clock created tension in all the interactions, in all the scenes, in all the episodes, because when Janelle stood up to Kody, it wasn't about favoritism or rules. It was about being invisible for decades. And if you believe her breaking point was subtle, you'll be amazed at the raw confrontation that forced viewers to see the Brown family disintegrating in real time. The confrontation wasn't conducted in a secluded corner. It was done under cameras, in front of millions of viewers, and there was no editing out the truth. For years Janelle had bitten her tongue, preferring peace to discord. But the gravity of Kody's allegations, the favoritism towards Robyn, and the agony of observing her children severed at last silenced her. The encounter started out with Kody pacing, his tone icy, his fist locked as he charged Janelle with betrayal. He insisted on compliance. He presented himself as the victim, the husband left by wives, who would not support him. But Janelle's face spoke otherwise. This was not a woman cowed by his rage now. This was a woman who had nothing left to lose. She pushed back, not theatrically, but with raw, brutal honesty. She identified the double standards, the hypocrisy of rules applied only to her kids. She informed him what Christine had already discovered, that his so-called leadership was in fact control, masquerading as concern. And in that moment, Kody appeared for the first time to be rattled. Because Janelle wasn't Christine, the wife he'd long written off as emotional. Janelle had always been his down-to-earth anchor. If she was disappearing, then the final threads of his credibility were fraying too. The silence after what she said was deafening. Not only on set, but in the sitting rooms of people who had invested years into watching this family act stability. In that silence, the truth hit home. This marriage was not strained, it was broken. And Kody, rather than opting for reconciliation, opted for fury. He doubled down, pointing fingers, shouting, laying bare the rawness of his fraying control. The fight wasn't merely a tussle, it was a break, one that could never be repaired. Beginning that moment, the audience understood. Janelle wasn't merely debating her future with Kody. She was already halfway out the door. And if you thought that was the peak of the family's downfall, hold on to your seat. Because Meri, the original wife who had previously been Kody's rock, was set to receive her own comeuppance. Meri had been by his side from day one, the first wife. The one who used to be there at Kody's side when the vision of sister wives was still hued as divine, chaste, and everlasting. But somewhere along the way, she was no longer a wife to Kody, but something else altogether. A ghost haunting the spaces of a family that no longer wished to own her. Her tale was not one of loud shouting matches like Janelle's or Christine's. Rather, it was one of gradual, painful whittling away. Discussions that trailed off into silence. Texts that weren't responded to. Hand touches that never materialized. She begged for crumbs of connection for years. And Kody went on national television to declare that he had no interest in her, no attraction, and no future with her. The embarrassment wasn't intimate. It was on national television. Millions of people watched him brush her off, watched him treat her life as just a friend. And still Meri remained. She remained through the loneliness, through the catfishing scandal that should have been a wake-up call, through the constant hope that maybe, one day he'd look at her the way he used to. But the look never came. Instead, Kody toughened his words, informing her flat out that he'd never again be romantic with her. That aspect of their relationship was done. Finished. The breaking point wasn't shouting. It wasn't a fight, or a betrayal, or even a dramatic exit. It was something smaller but more painful. A realization. Meri had come to the understanding that she wasn't a part of this family anymore. At least, not the way she had envisioned it. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a partner. She was a remnant of a past that Kody was eager to erase. And in the silence, everything changed. Meri, after all those years waiting, finally embraced the truth that Kody had said, but she had refused to hear their marriage was dead. But here's the twist no one expected. Meri's quiet endurance may have been more dangerous to Kody than Christine's defiance or Janelle's honesty. Because while they walked away with new lives, Meri's presence was a constant reminder of what Kody had destroyed. And if you think Meri's silent departure brought an end to Kody's demise, wait until you see what Robyn did next. For years, Robyn was portrayed as the golden wife, Kody's soulmate, the one he defended, shielded, and placed above all others. Whereas Meri, Janelle, and Christine endured rejection and neglect, Robyn appeared to luxuriate in attention, in favor, in the delusion of a fairy tale love story. But favoritism does not come without a price. And for the Brown family, that price came crashing down. The fissures were already apparent long before the rest of the wives departed. With every time Kody sent his older kids away to spend holidays with Robyn's, With every time he rationalized breaking rules for her clan, but imposed them rigidly on the rest, the bitterness accumulated. And bitterness, untempered, is toxic. By the time Christine parted ways, that toxicity had penetrated all. Robyn protested that she never wanted to be the favorite, yet her behavior said otherwise. She accepted the role, leaned on it, and rationalized it as if marrying Kody was the only legitimate marriage. She wept on television about needing the family together, but the reality was obvious. Her togetherness needed everyone else to fall in line beneath her. And then came the backlash. Christine's followers labeled her manipulative. Janelle's children labeled her as someone who isolated Kody. Even the staunchest of all, Meri, confessed that Robyn's presence altered everything. Suddenly, the woman who formerly had the most control over the family became the face of its demise. What Kody and Robyn believed would be their triumph, a family reduced to them alone, became their loss. Because once the cameras turned off, once the dust settled, they weren't bathed in love and loyalty, they were enveloped in silence. No sister wives, few children dropping by, just a couple holding on to a marriage founded on favoritism and fear. And in the silence, Robyn's tears no longer appeared like innocence. They appeared like regret, perhaps even guilt. Because when you construct happiness on the devastation of others, it does not endure. But the question is this: was Robyn really the villain of the tale, or another victim of Kody's deteriorating control? The wives weren't the only ones to bear scars for Kody's decisions. The kids, once presented as the pounding heart of this enormous family, soon began speaking out. And when they did, the myth of Kody as a devoted father was broken utterly. For years the television painted him as a man pulled too thin, a father of almost 20 children with the best of intentions. But off-camera resentment brewed. His older kids noticed how often he was gone. How birthdays flew by without notice. How milestones were eclipsed by his infatuation with Robyn's home. The contrast stung. Where Kody was at every school function, every morning routine with Robyn's children, the others had excuses. A phone call perhaps. Sometimes not even that. Then came COVID and the disparity became hard to deny. Kody imposed merciless rules on some of his children, in the name of safety, in the name of prudence, while flagrantly disobeying them for Robyn's. Sons and daughters who just wanted to visit their father were scolded as reckless, irresponsible, even hazardous. The pain of those words lingered, particularly for Janelle's sons who noticed the double standard and voiced it. And when the older children began sharing their accounts, fans listened. They did not portray him as the doting patriarch the show had long presented, but as a man who preferred control to connection. They talked about his rage, his paranoia, his conspiracies, and revealed the truth that TLC's cameras could only suggest. The toughest part? Most of these children still yearned for his acceptance, still held on to the father he had promised he would be. And yet, again and again, Kody didn't show up. Not only in their houses, but in their hearts. And in that sorrow, the fantasy fell apart. Because if the children, the very purpose of this family's existence, no longer believed their father, then what was left of the dream? But if you think the children's voices brought the story to a close, you'd be mistaken. Because there was one more layer, one more twist, that would make even the most devoted viewers question everything. The sister wives' dream started with one man, one vision, and one vow, that a family united on faith, love, and unity could succeed, even at the expense of 4 marriages. It lasted briefly, the fantasy. Fans watched for the dysfunction and the allure of an extended family living in harmony. But what started as a tale of togetherness gradually disintegrated into one of solitude, bias, and deception. By the time Christine left, the cracks were canyons. When Janelle stood before Kody, the foundation trembled even more severely.